Hey everybody, it's Wednesday morning, time for another Ask Chuck Dixon, where you ask me, Chuck Dixon. I promise you, this is the real Chuck Dixon. It's not a phony, it's not an imitation. You get to ask me questions about what I do for a living, and what I do for a living is I write comic books, and I've been writing comic books for, someone told me, getting close to 40 years. Wow, it seems like yesterday. Larry Hama took me out to lunch. I'm going to start off this week not answering a question by giving everybody a thank you. Hunter Ninja Bear, a 360-page graphic novel, managed to reach its goal of $50,000 and still climbing. So thank you to everybody who supported it, everybody who helped spread the word. I mean, putting together a crowdfunder like this and then pushing it toward its goal is, it's rough, man. And the gatekeepers on the internet don't make it any easier. They make it as hard as possible. So a lot of the thanks for making this happen goes out to you folks who help spread the word. And I'd like to thank the guys on Crowdfunding Kings, and Eric July, and all the other podcasts that I did, Pops Van Zant. You all helped. You all helped move that needle. So my appreciation to everybody. You can't do something like this on your own. And I promise you, this is a terrific project. It is a gorgeously drawn historical epic. And as I've said over and over again, it's complete. You folks who supported this, you're going to be seeing this massive tome very, very shortly. Hey, if you want to contact me directly, suggestions, questions, critiques, pictures of your doggy or your kitty, send them to brunobookstore@gmail.com, brunobookstore@gmail.com. Let's start with Craig Giles. With all your knowledge on writing comic books and novels, would you ever write your own how-to book like Denny O'Neil and a few others have done? Or maybe go down the Substack route and give readers a behind-the-scenes look at how your books are put together? Well, I'm kind of doing that here. I don't want to write a how-to book. When I talk about writing, I hope, my intention is never to tell anybody how to do it. I'm never trying to teach anybody how to write. All I'm telling you is how I do it. And problems I've run into and challenges I've run into and how I worked around them. Because every writer is different. There's no one way to write. And I think it takes, I think what Denny did was basically show you the nuts and bolts of comic book writing, but not tell you how to approach anything. Because Denny, as any good writer does, kept an open mind about how to write comics. He was always learning, and he told me he learned from every writer he met. He learned a little something, and that's kind of what you do. So when you see these how-to books on how to write comics, and they're written by a guy you never heard of, he's just cashing in, and he's telling you how to do it. Well, there's no one answer on how to do anything, especially writing. I mean, maybe certainly there's only one way to change the oil in your car, but there's a million different ways to write a story. And it all depends on who you are and what story you want to tell and how you want to tell it. I find that I used to read, well, for a short while, I read like writing magazines, and I read a couple of books on writing, and all they did was discourage me, because it's like, wow, my brain doesn't work this way. I can't do that. I can't do what they're telling me to do. And there's all these rules. They go, write every day and keep a notepad on you and all these other things. Well, a lot of that stuff I don't do. And I never have. There's no formulas, no success. There's no, magic pencil that'll turn you into a great artist. So, I probably never will unless, I decide I want to. Yes, I'm a writer. I can change my mind at any time. Alan Barebi. Chuck, were you a fan of everything having to be sigil connected at I think he's referring to CrossGen. Did you and Mark Alessi get along? Okay. If you've ever read a CrossGen book, there was this Uber story It was like a built-in Crisis on Infinite Earths built into every book. And there were these sigil keepers and sigil bearers, and every character had a sigil that gave them their powers or special insights or what. It's kind of like the Force. And I didn't like any of it. I didn't like how all the stories had to be connected. I didn't like how all of the books, even if they were in the historical genre or mystery genre, had to be set in this alternate sigil universe. So nothing was taking place on Earth. And I kind of rebelled against that when I created El Cazador, because El Cazador takes place on Earth. And I thought it kind of diluted the appeal of the books. But Mark Alessi wanted the Sigilverse, and he would never let go. And he had an idea that the Sigilverse appealed to our core fans. Well, you can't appeal to your core fans. You have to appeal to everybody. And you can certainly put enough in there to keep the core fans happy, but you can't dictate everything by what a certain number of fans want. And the problem is that our core fan base was shrinking over the course of CrossGen's history. Now, did I get along with Mark? I got along with Mark as well as you could get along with Mark. And if you knew Mark, you know what you're talking about. I liked Mark. He was a personally magnetic kind of guy. We fought all the time, but I never didn't like him. I never really got mad at him. I kind of knew going in when I first met him, this guy's a prickly pear. This guy likes to be right all the time. But he's in my wheelhouse now. He's in my jungle now. He's in comics. And I don't care how many years he spent researching comics. I was always going to know more about it than him. And trying to impress that upon him. And he's a smart guy. He's classically trained. He was a successful businessman until he got into comics. And he was a really interesting guy. And I'm very grateful that in recent years, like the year leading up to his death, we got reacquainted and we were actually talking about being partners in a new business venture. So I was seeing Mark a couple of times a week, for like almost a year before he unfortunately passed away. And we would meet for lunch, once or twice a week and discuss business plans and everything else. And, I considered him a friend. He considered me a friend. And I liked how his mind worked. But boy, we had some terrific fights. But in the end, he changed comics. He changed how comics looked. If you look at mainstream American comic books before CrossGen and after CrossGen, it's a stark difference. Marvel and DC had to up their game in how their books were colored and presented and produced because of the high bar that CrossGen raised. And CrossGen was able to do this because we were all working at a facility. We were all working together. It was like an animation studio. And it really lent itself to the kind of detail-oriented, high-quality work that we turned out. And it was all done on a very, the artist did a page a day. You had to be a page a day guy. Somehow Mark, for 99% of the artists were page a day guys. And we hired the best inkers, letterers, colorists in the business. People with legendary talents. And Mark managed to get us all to come down to Tampa Bay and work at his fledgling comic book company, which unfortunately went belly up. We were ahead of our time, and we ran out of time. And there were all kinds of background financial problems that he was having. But I loved working there. And I got to create some incredible stuff. Way of the Rat, El Cazador, other books like that. And I dug the atmosphere. I dug hanging out with people. I made some friends that I'll be friends with for life. And it was a very, very enjoyable time. But I'll tell you a couple of stories, and they both involve Steve Epting. Steve Epting was my artist on Crux, which was a book that I took over from Mark Waid when Mark Waid left in a huff. He and Mark Alessi didn't get along at all. Mark Waid did not know how to play Mark Alessi, didn't know how to react to Mark Alessi, and so they just butted heads and nothing ever got accomplished. And finally Wade left, and both of them were glad to see the back of each other. So I take over Crux, which is a book that Mark Waid admitted he created on his drive from his apartment to the CrossGen offices. And he said, well, this character is this guy and this character, and it was all DC characters. Basically, he had recast DC characters, given them new names, and stuck them in this book. And it was kind of Doom Patrol, whatever. I wasn't really listening when he told me. So I'm stuck with this book, this sci-fi epic that's just chasing its tail all over the place. And but I have Steve Epting on the art. So I'm able to come up with really interesting scenarios and character moments and dramatic high points and all the rest in a book that should have been, frankly, canceled. And the first meeting I had with Steve, because writers had an office and the artists worked in cubicles, and I had to meet all my artists. And Mark said, have them into your office and talk to each one, right? So I was a huge fan of Steve Epting, still am. I love the work that he did at Marvel and DC. And I always thought he was an underrated talent, and he was underrated until he got to CrossGen, and we really saw what the guy could do. It was apparent to everybody this guy is a major talent. So Steve comes into the office, and I say, I got a 1-year plan for Crux. And he says, well, what is it? I said, we're going to do Crux for another year, and then we're going to do a pirate book. And he says, well, has Mark approved of this? And I said, I haven't told Mark yet. And I did tell Mark, and he said, no, I don't want you to do that. Well, that didn't change my plans. So I said, this issue of Crux, Steve Epting, you're going to stop drawing Crux, and Sergio Cariello is going to take over the art, and we're going to start a pirate book. And I did not discuss it at meetings. Only a few people on the floor knew we were going to do it. And now this is 6 months before Pirates of the Caribbean came out. But I had this feeling that a pirate book, damn that, where is the phone? I had this feeling that a pirate book was what we should be doing. This is my life. I'm editing this thing live as I'm doing it, and I forgot to disconnect the phone. So anyway, I had a feeling a pirate book would be a perfect fit at CrossGen, and certainly a perfect fit with Steve Epting on art. Well, one day, Mark's out touring the offices, touring the quads, looking to see what everybody's doing. He looks over Steve Epting's shoulder and doesn't see anything that he recognizes. And there's all this pirate reference. And he doesn't see any of the Crux characters on any of the boards that Steve's working on. And he says, what is this? Is this an issue of Crux? And Steve says, no, this is the new book we're doing. It's called El Cazador. And Mark's like, what new book? He says, the one Chuck came up with. Well, next thing I know, Mark's in my doorway, and he is livid. He is crimson red. He is so angry. He says, I didn't create this company so you could write whatever you want. And I says, you're right, Mark, because if I could write whatever I want, Steve and I would be doing a Western right now. I said, but a pirate book is a perfect fit for this company. It's one of the only genres we haven't explored. And I think it's going to be a huge success. It's time for a pirate book. And he was just angry, but there was nothing he could do about it because Steve had, almost completed the entire first 32-page issue. And so his arm twisted behind his back, which Mark did not like. We did El Cazador, and consequently, it was CrossGen's biggest selling title ever. And I think part of it was because it was not part of the Sigilverse, and we made sure people knew that. The one thing about CrossGen that people knew was that if we did a genre, be it mystery, science fiction, barbarians, they knew that we were going to do it earnestly. It wasn't going to be a pastiche. It wasn't going to be some hollow parody of the genre. It was going to be a real, earnest genre entry. And so I think that was the root of the success. Now, I told you I had another Steve Epting story. Steve Epting, here we see happy Steve Epting. He's mostly happy, but when someone cast the CrossGen movie, if they ever made a movie about CrossGen, everyone agreed that Steve Epting would have to be played by Sam Elliott. But anyway, because he just has that kind of voice, he has that kind of demeanor. Well, one day, shortly after Steve Epting got hired, I was told this, I wasn't witness to it. Mark was again, touring the quads, looking over people's shoulders, telling, micromanaging for the most part. And he comes upon Steve Epting. Steve Epting's drawing the lead female character in Crux. And Mark says, well, you need to make her waist more narrow, and you need to make her hair a little longer, and you need to make her eyes bigger. And, you need to do this, you need to do that. And Steve Epting put down his pencil, turned to Mark, and said, the hell I will. And that was it. Mark never bothered Steve again. Not that Mark was any kind of wimp, but he just, Mark was a keen enough student of human nature to know, I just ran into a guy that ain't going to back down. I ran into a guy I can't push around. So he went and pestered somebody else. So, I could tell CrossGen stories all day, but I'm gonna leave it there. Craig Giles again. I should have given you a twin spin. Chuck, have you ever had a great idea for a character story or plot only to discover once you start your research that someone's beat you to it? Yes, I cried when I saw the trailer for Escape from New York in a movie theater. I went, oh, I had that idea. I was nobody at the time. I hadn't put one word down on paper, but I felt like this concept was mine. I owned this concept. What did they do? I mean, I had this idea of walling off New York and being this urban criminal jungle and blah, blah, blah. And someone has to go in for some reason. I mean, I didn't think of the president of the United States being kidnapped or anything like that. But the high concept of the story, I had played around with in my head for a few years. This is before I was really any kind of professional writer. So, yeah, it's happened. And it's happened to every writer. It's like if you don't, you get beaten to the punch. Joshua Duncan, question for you. What would you like to see happen with ArcToons over the next few years? Is there a strategy in place that you can share? Hey, if you're not visiting ArcToons, you need to. It's a free digital... I'm not talking to you, Joshua. I'm talking to everybody else who hasn't looked at ArcToons. It's a free digital comic service. It's in high res. You can read it on any device all the way up to the big screen in your family room because the resolution is that crystal clear. And it's free, it's free, it's free. We have dozens and dozens and dozens of stories running with weekly episodes, sometimes more frequently than weekly. And we're probably by the time you see this video, we will be at 8 million views. I mean, this is a serious endeavor, folks, and I'm doing a lot of work there. Now, what's the general game plan? Everybody has a different game plan at ArcToons because it's basically, it's easy to get on ArcToons. It's an easy venue to get on. You have to follow certain rules about content. There's certain things we don't want to see on ArcToons. And as long as you don't have any of them in your story and you prove you can do the stuff in a timely fashion and it's well crafted and entertaining and everything else, you are welcome. Independent creators are welcome to present their stuff to ArcToons, and we'll tell you how to format it, and we're all off to the races. And it's so it's like an open venue. Now my own personal reasons for being on ArcToons, it ain't money, because I most of the work I'm doing is spec. You can go to Patreon and help me out. You can go to Subscribestar and help me out. But that's how I pay my artists, by the kindness of strangers. So, but for me, it's about creating content. And we've already signed a film option on one of the things I created at ArcToons. And I'm not going to say which one because I don't want to answer questions for the next 5 years. Whatever happened to that movie? Because that's what happens when you sign an option deal and you let people know. They just like, what about that movie you talked about, 23 years ago? Well, it ain't going to happen, buddy. But that's the way it goes. Them's the breaks in Hollywood. But yeah, everybody's got a different reason for being on ArcToons. The same reason everybody has a different reason for wanting to create comics. But mine is to create new content with people I like to work with in a relatively painless venue that doesn't involve waiting for printing or waiting for anything else. It's all about views. It's not about sales. It's about reaching out to readers, and that is what I've always been about, to get in front of as many readers as I can. Arthur Tripp, what is your feelings about present-day Comic-Con? Have they lost their way? Maybe it's just me. Well, it's just you and 500,000 other people. I was there 2014, I think was the last time. And that same production meeting, in a production meeting recently, they brought up, and we'll send you guys to San Diego. And me and my collaborators went, oh no, because it's a crowded, messy, melee at that place. It's not the pleasant experience that it once was, but it's huge. Maybe it's too huge. The problem with San Diego Comic-Con is it has less and less to do with comics over time. One of the con organizers confessed to me that the only reason there's comic book material at San Diego anymore is because under their charter with the state of California, there has to be a certain percentage of comic book creators and comic book publishers and comic book material on the convention floor, or they lose their tax status. And that's the only reason there's still as much comics as there is at Comic-Con. Because what Comic-Con has really become is, it's America's biggest film festival, America's biggest pop cultural festival, and it's like con for the movie industry. And San Diego is a quick 90-minute ride down from LA. So for the studios, it's cheap. They stick the stars in limos, put them up at a hotel, and they send them down there to promote. And the media shows up, and it's all win-win for the big studios because it's cheap. It's a cheap promo gig, and that's what it's turned into, unfortunately. And conventions overall have basically turned into cosplay pageants, and I'm not crazy about any of that. I mean, if you cosplay, fine, that's great, that's fun, but cosplay's not comics. Cosplay's not about comics. It's not about the medium. I mean, how many comic book characters did we see in this picture? I don't think any. So, that's what it's become. The cons just aren't fun like they used to be. You used to feel like you were coming home. You felt like Norm walking into Cheers when you went to a con. Now, not so much. Elias Wengel? Sorry if I murdered your last name. Which character was most ruined by Hollywood? Oh, hands down, Indiana Jones. Raiders of the Lost Ark is one of my favorite films of all time. And Steven Spielberg said it's the film he worked hardest on. Why did he work so hard on it? Because his career was in the toilet. He had nearly bankrupt 2 studios with the disaster, the box office plague that was 1941. And he was trying to get back in the good graces. He needed a hit. And George Lucas reached out a hand and pulled him out of the water. And he worked his butt off on Raiders of the Lost Ark. He was actually on set every day. And he did a lot of prep work, a lot of preparation. And boy, does it show. It shows that there's a lot of attention paid in this movie. It's a fantastic adventure film. It's funny. The performances are all spot on. Then we get to the sequels. And Spielberg is not as engaged because now he's back on top again, so he doesn't have to work as hard. And he obviously isn't working as hard. And the stuff, the jokes don't work because they're stepping on them. It becomes comedy is introduced to the movies as opposed to humor. Big difference between comedy and humor. And the storytelling is lazy. The writing gets lazier. They go for cheap gags. The stunts get ridiculous, whereas in Raiders of the Lost Ark, that was believable. The things that were happening, as believable as can be in a pastiche of old movie serials. But at least we felt like we were still in the real world. The effects get crappy. Everything's not good about any of it. And I know people love them, but it's because you love the character. And I want to see them too. And that's what pisses me off about what they did to Indiana Jones, because I love the character, I love the franchise, I love the concept. It should have taken more care, maybe given the sequels to someone else who actually gave a crap, instead of just pumping out, one lame entry after another. You have to take care of franchises. And of course, James Bond. They worked hard to ruin James Bond. I mean, the movie Spectre. I can't bring myself to see the new movie. I mean, crybaby James Bond throwing his gun away. I mean, this ain't right. This ain't right. They got to get this franchise back on course. But I don't see it happening because they're looking through the wrong end of the telescope out there in Hollywood. Christopher Cooksey. People say they're tired of woke Hollywood movies, but they can't stop talking about them, even if it's to say how bad they are. There's no such thing as bad publicity for the big studios. I tend to differ there. So what's it going to take to get all the review and live stream channels to start expressing real apathy and start giving energy to more independent entertainment? Well, they're going to wake up because reality is slapping the creators in the face. I know you want to talk about the streaming people and critics, but I want to talk about things in general, and then I'll get to that. The reality is beginning to slap them in the face. For one thing, the Chinese movie-going audience that Hollywood relied on, and the money coming from China Hollywood relied on, well, that's over, baby. I know it's not Chinese, but it's sayonara to all that. China has restricted the release of American films now. They're not on anywhere near as many screens as they once were. And this, if you look at box office, this has really cut into profits. I mean, in a big way. Movies that would have made $1.5 billion, $2 billion are struggling to get to like 800 million worldwide. Because China has restricted access to their theaters. Well, for one reason, content. For another, Hollywood basically showed up and showed China how to make blockbuster movies, so they make their own. And they're very successful, and their audience is perfectly happy with seeing them. The other slap in the face is the downfall, not downfall, but certainly the decline of a lot of these streaming services who are seeing their subscription base fall off, particularly Netflix, which lost another million subscribers in the past quarter, and they're struggling to come up with tentpole events and everything else. The problem is there's a shrinking number of box office stars who can create a tentpole event for the streaming services. And why they need these blockbuster TV series and movies for the streaming services, they bring in new subscribers. Netflix in particular took a dive in an instant when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock. Will Smith was a big moneymaker for Netflix because a new Will Smith project would bring in 15 to 20 million new subscribers. And Will Smith, he's on the shelf. He may never be back. He's that was a bad move for him. I laugh when people say, oh, he just did it for publicity. Well, there's some bad publicity for you. And it hurt him. And it hurt Netflix very badly. So they're all looking for that next big hit, but there just aren't that many people that will bring in new subscribers. And yeah, it's all woke, and I think people are getting tired of it. And I think the superhero genre, the comic book genre, I think that's starting to wind down a little bit because, how much further can you go with these turned up to 11 CGI phantasmagorias that they're putting on the screens? Now, as far as people, making a living from criticizing Hollywood and criticizing these movies, well, that's always going to happen. It's easy to jump on these and poke fun at them. I mean, I watch Critical Drinker, and it's kind of negative. But that brings in eyeballs. People want to share the hate. I've tried never to do that. I mean, yeah, I know I just dumped all over Indiana Jones and Steven Spielberg, but he deserves it. But I also will praise stuff that I really like. I mean, I'll tell you about books and movies and things like that I think you should see, that I think you would enjoy. So I'm not one of these, let me tell you everything that's wrong. But that's clickbait, and people respond to that, unfortunately. That the continuing gyre of negativity that is the internet. draws viewers to that, kind of negative opinion, and that's just the way it is. And but overall, I think the problem with Hollywood is that things go in cycles. Even old Hollywood lost their way. By the time the 60s roll around, old Hollywood and the old Hollywood system had no idea what audiences wanted anymore. They were just throwing crap against the wall. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know what the younger audience wanted. I mean, that's what the studios are facing now and going to face in the future. But, it can all be turned around. It was turned around in the 70s, certainly. And I use Easy Rider. Easy Rider's a terrible movie, in my opinion, but it did wake Hollywood up because it did huge box office, won Best Picture of the Year, and it was made for 29 cents, and with a Brownie home movie camera or whatever, and and Hollywood realized, oh my gosh, maybe we should let some of these younger auteur directors and screenwriters have a go, because first of all, we can pay them peanuts, and we might get a hit or two out of it. And of course, all of this leads to things like Star Wars by the end of the 70s, and it's a whole new Hollywood after that. And but we're kind of reaching the end of that age here. It had a good run, but I think people are looking for something else. And I think what they're looking for is a good time at the movies. We all want to go to the movies and be kids. Just be entertained. Not pandered to, not talked down to. We have to respect our intelligence, but that sense of wonder seems to be gone. And I'd like to see it come back. I think we all would. Kenny Todd. I have two things. First, I got a lot of twin spins here I should have done. I have two things. First, I was wondering if you could tell us a couple of stories about Mr. Grant to honor him. Is there anything you have written that you don't have a copy of? It seems incredible to me that he was missing something he wrote, but I guess life happens. Kenny Todd helped Alan find some Doctor Who comics that he did not have in his possession. So thank you, Kenny Todd. Alan Grant, I got to work with him a lot on the Batman titles, and I stayed in communication with him even after that. One of my favorite writers on Dread and Batman. Co-creator of Lobo. I mean, just a terrific talent, terrific guy. I always say he was a great storyteller on paper and in person. And he was kind of easy to get along with. We spent a lot of time at Bat Summits with him, and Alan would never speak till he had something to say. There was no input from him. If he was fine with everything that was going on, that was great. If he had an objection, he always, made it plain what he was about. He's a very outspoken guy. He had a lot of opinions, but he was impossible to categorize. Like Larry Hama, I never knew what Alan would think from one topic to another. His opinions always came as a surprise because he never followed any particular ideology or anything else. Very unpredictable, active intellect. And just a friendly guy, just a warm guy, a good time. It was always a good time when you're hanging out with Alan. And just don't ever call him English, because he was a very proud Scot, and he used to entertain us with he would repeat lines from movies by actors who weren't Scots, trying to do the Highland accent. And he would repeat these lines, and we would crack up. My favorite was, "I'll take you to the Ballymarkers and no further." And just a great guy. One funny story was he knew what a huge Dredd fan I was, and we were standing around, taking a break at one of the summits. And he said, "What did you think of the Sly Stallone Dredd movie?" And I said, "Well, I liked it." And he actually reached out a hand and shoved me away from him. And then said, "Oh my God, what? Oh, I'm so sorry." It was just a visceral reaction to you liking the Sly Stallone Dredd movie. So yeah, just a sweetheart of a guy. He will be missed by everybody. One of the most beloved figures I've ever met in comics. And as far as having everything I've done, I took a tip from John Severin. I read an interview. John Severin had all of his comics bound. And so I always put a copy aside of everything to be bound. And so I've never missed anything. Nothing. I didn't give away my last copy of anything. And then in storage, I have 3 copies of every comic I've ever done are in storage. But to make sure I didn't miss anything, and I have something to hand down to the kids and grandkids. Though I don't have grandkids yet, but I hope to. So I might have to adopt some. Yeah, I wanted to have basically a library of my work. Plus, it helps with reference if I forget a character's name or whatnot. Particularly when I was at DC, my hardcover bound volumes of all my work it was invaluable as a reference. Rick Garcia, what's the first thing you would do if you took over the Bat titles? Well, I've discussed this before, and it didn't matter what title I took over, it would be crossovers. I would turn Batman into a crossover whore, like I am. And he would just have wild adventures across many, many franchises. I would keep lawyers busy deep into the night lining up licensing agreements, because that's the way to get eyeballs on. Now I know Batman's a popular character in DC. I think every other comic title they publish is a Batman title, but the sales suck because readers have not been alerted that there's a new sheriff in town, or there's any real changes being made, or hey, these Batman comics are good. Nothing to bring readers in, but nothing brings readers in like a crazy crossover. So I would just go for it. I would just totally, from a mercenary standpoint, from a money-making standpoint, to get eyeballs back on Batman, I would do crossovers, and then once we had got a substantial number of readers back, go, open the old stand again and start doing good classic action, crime, mystery, detection stories with Batman. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay. Hey, it's a twin spin. Got another question from Rick Garcia. What known actor would you pick to play Levon Cade? Lucas Black is my one and only choice. He's perfect. He's at exactly the right age. If you don't know who Lucas Black is, obviously he's on one of the NCIS shows. I never watched them, so I don't know. Where I first saw him was in Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. And of course, he was much younger then. But I like the fact that he had an Alabama accent. And because he's from Alabama, and that's where Levon Cade's from. I liked he had kind of a Steve McQueen vibe in that movie. That thing where if you sat him down in the space shuttle, he would look like he knew how to fly it. There was an authority and an easygoing manner to his performance that I really liked. And once I started writing Levon Cade, I kept thinking back to him, and I thought, wow, that Fast and Furious movie was a few years ago. He's just the right age to play Levon, so he would be my one and only choice. So I don't know how Mr. Black feels about that, but if I won the Mega Millions, I would be reaching out because I would fund my own movie, and I would say I want to hire you for some crazy amount of money because I think you're the right guy for this role. And you say, well, I don't know, and I say, yeah, well, who thought Chris Pratt would be what he is if you looked at him earlier in his career? But, there's a guy who's completely changed, what he was about before to viewers. And but I think Lucas Black be a perfect fit. Speaking of Levon, I got 2 novels basically released back to back, released within a month of each other. I got Levon's Prey and Levon's Range. In Levon's Prey, Levon is wrapping up the 3rd book in what is a trilogy within the 10-book series. So far, 11-book series with the publication of Levon's Range. And he wraps up this child trafficking ring in a very final way, and as he will, and causes all kinds of ripples and problems for him, as it always does. And in Levon's Range, we find that Levon has relocated himself and his family to Idaho under another name. He's on the run from several federal agencies. And we find out that he didn't realize it, but he's also being stalked by a very, very dangerous international crime cartel, which we met some of the members earlier in the series, but they have finally come for their reckoning. And that will lead into the action of the 12th book, which I'm starting soon. So, You can check that out. They're at Amazon, our corporate overlord. And I think you will dig them if you haven't read them before. And if you have been reading them, well, I just told you there's 2 more out there to look for. Hey, I want to thank everybody for watching, listening, subscribing, super thanks, liking, all that stuff you do, all those little buttons you push under the screen. I'll put links to everything I can think of underneath the video. And I just want to thank all of you for watching and listening. And I'll see everybody down the road.